You're listening to Get Clarity with Jamie Smart.
I'm Jamie Smart, and in this episode, you're going to hear an interview I did 7 or 8 years ago with a good friend and colleague, Sandy Krot. Now, at the time I recorded this interview, I was very early in my own journey into exploring the principles behind clarity, and Sandy had been sharing these principles with individuals and with corporate clients for over 30 years at the time we recorded this. So as you're listening to this now, it's getting on for 40 years that Sandy's been sharing this understanding with people. And a particular area of interest and focus for Sandy is the whole domain of the corporate world, leadership teams, and that sort of thing. So I think you're really going to enjoy her perspective on taking these principles into a variety of different environments. So here's the episode. So welcome, Sandy.
Thank you. It's fantastic to be here.
And where I like to start with these is just to ask if you could maybe say a little bit about how people can listen to this to really get the most from it.
The best way I can say it is I think people tend to listen to try to get an answer to a question or to solve a problem or to get some help. And I completely understand that, but it's interesting that kind of listening actually interferes with the capacity of your mind to just take in things that don't even seem to be relevant to your problem. Oh. So my best advice is to be just to listen like you were listening to casual conversation almost. Like it sounds funny to not pay attention, but that is almost what you want to do because it's our intellect that tends to pay attention, tends to think it knows the answer or think it knows what it needs to know, what it needs for an answer. And the best thing to do is just listen as relaxed as you possibly can, and kind of like you're sitting next to somebody on a bus and you're trying not to listen to the conversation, but you can't help it.
Listening with half an ear.
yeah. I know that sounds funny, but we're really trying to bypass your intellect and bypass what you already think you know to get something new and fresh. And the more relaxed you are and the more, in a way, less you care, the more likely that's going to happen. So.
You know, I was at a session the other day with some mutual friends, Aaron and Mara, mm-hmm. And I suddenly realized that there was still a piece of, a program on my mind that was going, okay, now what do I need to do to put this into practice, kind of thing. And just noticing that and going, oh, I don't even need to pay that much attention.
Mm-mm. Yeah. Mm-mm. Exactly.
Okay, thanks for that, Sandy. And the other question I'm always curious about is what first sparked your interest in these principles?
Yeah. Well, we're going back 30 years. So at the time, I was had been in the field of counseling and psychology for 5 years. I studied it in university. I had always wanted to be a counselor, psychologist. Had been in practice for 5 years and had become what I would call disillusioned. Did not like the results I was getting with my clients, wanted to help, did not feel like I was much of a help, did not feel like the training that I received at the university was adequate, went to workshop after workshop after workshop, would get tidbits at every workshop I attended, but nothing really that I could count on or that I could rely on to help my clients, and quite frankly, to help myself. Because I wasn't a poster child for happy psychological well-being at all at that time. So I had decided to leave the field. When I was younger, I had gone outward bound, which is a kind of a wilderness survival experience that I loved. I'd spent a month in the wilderness. It tested me physically, it tested me psychologically, and it changed me to some degree. I thought, that's what I'm going to do. I want to become an outward bound instructor. That seems to actually do something for people. But I couldn't afford the tuition to the outward bound instructor school. So I thought, all right, I'm going to take one more job in the field, save every penny, and go to outward bound instruction. I figured it'd take me 6 months. I got hired to work at this shelter for runaway teens, doing family counseling. And as luck would have it, I was hired at the same time. Another woman was hired. Her name is Rita Shuford. And we shared a wall of our offices. She was on one side of the wall and I was on the other side of the wall. And the walls were thankfully very thin, thankfully for me, because I could overhear her sessions. And there was laughing going on. There was no laughing in my sessions. No laughing. My families were unhappy, stressed out, angry. The teenagers had run away or been thrown out of their house, and everybody was pointing fingers, and I felt more like a referee most of the time than a counselor. Rita's families would come out of her office, sometimes we'd come out at the same time, laughing with their arms around each other. Well, the first thing I did was go to my supervisor and say, what's the deal? How come Rita's getting the easy cases and I'm getting the hard cases? And he swore up and down, Sandy, no, I randomly assign these cases. She gets the same cases you get. So I invited her for coffee. I said, what's the deal? How come your families are laughing and mine are yelling at each other? And she said to me, well, I teach them about a deep feeling that lives inside of them, that they can access, that's there all the time. It's just that they're thinking something else, so they don't experience it. And I had this very puzzled look, and I'm waiting for her to say more. And she said, nothing more. And I said, well, what else do you do? And she said, no, that's it. And I said, that's it? She says, yeah, basically I teach my families there's a nice feeling to be had, and they could have it if they didn't think what they were thinking. Well, what about their dysfunction? What about their patterns? What about their issues? Oh, we don't talk about that, she says. She says once in a while we do, but mostly I just talk to them about this feeling. Well, that conversation just left me pretty cold. I didn't know what to make of it. And so later she gave me an audio tape. Remember, this is 30 years ago. And she said, here, listen to this. This is a man named Sydney Banks. That's who I get my inspiration from. So I listened to this audio tape, and it was a very bad copy of a very bad original. So I could barely hear it. And Sydney Banks speaks with a Scottish brogue. And I had absolutely no idea what he was saying on this audio tape. It went way over my head. He was talking about mind, thought, and consciousness. And I did not know. It, again, left me cold. But, so I give it back to her, but the thing that I couldn't shake were the results that Rita was getting. And I just kept asking her questions. And I kept hanging on around her. And she was this lighthearted, easygoing, happy human being. And she subsequently introduced me to some of her other friends and colleagues, all of whom had listened to Sydney Banks, and they were all like that. None of my friends were like that. So little by little, through almost a process of osmosis, because I did not understand what she was really saying, nor did I understand what Sid was saying on any of the subsequent audio tapes that she gave me, and eventually met Sid, and I couldn't make head or tails out of what he was saying those early days. But somehow I got changed. You know, it was the oddest thing. I found myself living in nicer feelings. I found myself not so wrapped up in the habitual thinking that had just gripped me in the past. And I just began to have some insights, and then I would share those little insights with my clients, and lo and behold, it would help them. So that was, and ever since then, you know, I've just been on the journey. And, you know, now there are books and there are CDs and there are movies and there's all kinds of things. Back then there was very, very little, but...
Back then there was that cassette tape.
That was that very, very bad cassette tape, which I don't know, I don't even have it anymore. I wish I did. But again, there's something about hearing the practical truth that I couldn't argue, and that I couldn't poke a hole in it. When Rita would say, "Well, look, there is a deeper feeling available," I couldn't poke a hole in that. I guess there is. Every once in a while, I find it. How come I don't have it more often? Is it my circumstances? Is it how I was raised? Is it my bank account? Well, it seems to me that sometimes I have that good feeling and all those negatives might be still true, but I don't feel the effect of it. So I just kind of did those kind of thought questions within my own mind, and little by little I just started to see, wow, it is an inside out experience. It truly, truly is.
And as I listened to you, you know, I was hearing you talk about the little insights that you would share with your clients, and then they would have an effect. What are some of the insights and discoveries, little or big or in between, that have really made a difference to you so far, Sandy?
But I remember the very first one I ever had. I remember it. And in many ways, it's probably the only one I've ever had, because I just keep seeing it more and more deeply. Would you like me to tell the story? It's a So again, this is 30 years ago. I had just begun to listen to what Rita had to say. I had met Sid. I had met a number of people who were teaching the principles, and it's just starting to find my way. And at the time, I would say I suffered from depression, and I laugh now, but my treatment for depression, aside from drugs and alcohol, which were a very popular treatment for me for my depression, my other treatment of choice was I would go home, I would close all the blinds in my house, turn off all the lights, put sad music on my stereo and cry. This is what I would do. And I would do it until I fell asleep. And sometimes in the morning I felt better, but sometimes I didn't. And I'd make myself go to work. I'd come home and I'd do it again. Well, I was feeling blue, and I came home from work and I did my usual, close the blinds, turn off all the lights, on came the sad music. And it popped into my head what I had been learning. Well, you know, this feeling you're having, it's your thinking. No, it isn't. No, it isn't my thinking. This is my life. This is the way life is. I've had a tough coming up, and this is the way it is. And then I'd cry some more, and then pop into my mind again. You know, if you weren't thinking this, I wonder if you'd feel differently. It just kept coming to mind. And then what came to mind was I had enrolled in a woodworking class that was starting that night. And I thought, oh no, I can't go. I'm too depressed. And then the thought would come, well, you know, if you went, you'd probably feel better. No, I can't go. So I had this little debate in my head. And then finally, honest to God, don't know why, but I summoned up the strength, and it really did feel that way, to get in my car and drive to the community college where the class was being held. I got to the parking lot, and I'm just about to turn around because I know I can't. I cannot go in. I'm too depressed. And somebody sees me who is taking the class with me, and then I'm trapped. Oh, Sandy, you're here. Okay. So now I have to go in. So I go in to the class, and it's a 3-hour woodworking class. And you can imagine, you know, you have to pay attention in a woodworking class, or you could lose, you know, appendages. So I go completely into that class. And I'm captivated by it. Thoroughly enjoy it. I come out of that class. I remember it like it was yesterday. And the community college where I took the class was at the top of this hill. And it was a brilliant, starry night. I opened the door and I saw those stars. And I thought, oh my God, I feel fantastic. And then I thought, and nothing's changed. My thinking changed. Oh my God, my thinking and my feelings are connected. And that just threw me into a whole new arena, that insight. And I have been learning and relearning and learning and relearning that insight for 30 years. In fact, just 2 days ago, I saw it more deeply. I saw the simplicity of the fact that you're feeling your thinking. Period. You're feeling your thinking, and you always will, and you can't escape it, and you can't, it's a system you cannot beat. The simplicity of it hit me again. It's the same insight. It just keeps magnifying, deepening. And that's the beauty of the principles. Is they're alive. They're a dynamic fact, and you keep seeing them more deeply as you look in this direction. So it's that's been that insight has really been the most profound one for me, and I see it in tiny moments, like I'm driving and traffic is bothering me, to much more profound moments when I just get in touch with just a beautiful state of mind, and I realize that what's happened is I've just allowed for some deeper thinking to show up in my mind. So it's just applies across my entire experience of my life.
And for people who are listening, I know that in hearing about the insight that your feelings are as a result of your thinking, that every thought comes with a feeling, a lot of people in the domain of, positive psychology, NLP, CBT, are like, yeah, of course, so I just need to change my thinking. I don't think that's what you're saying.
No. Well, I mean, yes and no, because it is true that if you change your thinking, your feeling is going to change, and that is the only way your feeling will ever change. But the beauty of it is you don't have to do it. You don't have to manufacture a new thought to have a different feeling. Just simply seeing the fact that you're feeling, you're thinking, just seeing that. What that does for people is what it does for me is it completely calms me down, because instead of thinking that I am feeling what's really happening, I am feeling my circumstances, I am feeling this problem, I am feeling this person. And when I see it that way, that I'm feeling this circumstance or I'm feeling this person, then I am charged with having to fix this circumstance or this person in order to feel differently. So it sets in motion all kinds of doings that then just complicate the whole experience, or at the very least lengthen it. When you see, no, you're not feeling your circumstances, you're feeling your thinking. That's all it is? Oh, I'm feeling my thinking.
And how come there isn't a doing associated with that?
Well,
because and the reason I ask is I think that I totally get that if I think I'm feeling my circumstances or I'm feeling that person or whatever, then I need to do something about it if I want to change the feeling. Mm-hmm. And that's because that's something outside. Mm-hmm. But I think for a lot of people, they relate to their thinking as being something outside as well. It's like, oh yeah, but I've got this thinking because of the way I was brought up, or I've got this limiting belief, or there's something wrong with me, or whatever it might be. Mm-hmm. And so they relate as though the thinking were an external problem or oppressor or whatever.
Right.
And yet I'm hearing a different way of relating to that.
Mm-hmm. When you realize that you're feeling your thinking, and you realize that your thinking is happening inside of you, it's being created within you via these gifts or this capacity to think and to be aware of your thinking. That's a capacity you were born with. That's where your thinking is coming from. Your thinking is coming from your capacity to think. It isn't coming from the outside world. If it were coming from the outside world, then we could put any experience or any circumstance in front of the 6.5 billion people and they'd see it all the same. Well, we know that's not true. So your thinking, it must be generated within. And when you see that you're feeling your thinking and that your thinking is generated within, Well, there's really nothing to do other than wait for new thinking to show up. And it always does. It does whether you know the truth of feeling coming from thinking or not. Whether you know that or not, you're always going to think something else. You cannot stop that fact. You try someday to just think one thing. You try it. Go ahead, try it. See how long you get. It's just your mind wants to move. It wants to create and recreate. You cannot stop that process. So just because I see that I'm feeling my thinking, and that's all. Period. That's where the experience is happening. It's happening in my thinking. And that my thinking is a product, an internal product of the capacity to think. That's just seeing that fact. There's nothing to do. There's nothing. What do you do? All you have to do is understand it. You just have to understand what's going on. When you see what's going on, you relax.
Yeah, and that's my experience too. And when you talk about seeing it, it's I think what we might call insightfully seeing it. So it's not just getting it intellectually.
Yeah.
Because getting it intellectually, it still seems like, okay, there's something to be doing.
Yeah.
And an example I just love is the first time films were shown in public by the Lumiere brothers. Yeah. They showed a film of a train pulling into a station, and people in the audience just freaked out and ran from the theater and were terrified because they thought the train was going to kill them.
Yeah.
And they just didn't understand the nature of films. And if a person doesn't understand the nature of films, you got to change the movie. Mm-hmm. Got to do something to have a different, a less frightening film, mm-hmm. or change the perspective or push it further away so it's not. Yeah. But as soon as you insightfully see the nature of film, mm-hmm. it changes.
It changes.
And they knew they were coming to see a movie. So intellectually, they knew that it was going to be a motion picture.
Yeah.
So they understood it intellectually before they sat in their seats.
Yeah.
But when it came on the screen, they were like, oh.
Yeah. Yeah. And you honestly have no choice until you understand it. You have no choice. You're going to take whatever action to get away from that experience. And then the second you realize, wait a minute, I know what's going on here. There's nothing to do. There is nothing to do. You just relax and watch the show. So psychologically, you just relax and watch and see what the next thought is. And there will be a next thought. And maybe it'll be worse. Sometimes that's what happens. You'll get an even more frightening thought, but now you understand it, and it's, I don't want to say humorous, but it's almost humorous. Like, oh man, am I really freaking myself out here?
Yeah, if you don't understand the nature of film, a movie can be absolutely terrifying. Once you do understand it, you can enjoy the same movie.
Yes. And I'm one of those people who, if there's something terrifying on the screen, I leave the room. Mm. And my partner will say, Sandy, it's a movie. Where are you going? I know.
Well, and you do know on a level, because while you leave the room, you probably don't call the police and say there's something terrible happening in our front room.
In my living room. Yeah. So of course, you have enough of an understanding to not try to do anything about the movie, but you can still get affected by it.
Sure.
Deeply affected by it, even though it's just a movie.
And deeply affected in a scary way, deeply affected in a moving and profoundly beautiful way.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's so interesting, Sandy. As I listened to you, and I heard you talking about about Rita, who, you know, so I just show them that there's a beautiful feeling, and I'm nodding and going, yeah, because I know that when a person's in connection with that feeling, and or with the knowledge that that's within them, whether they can feel it or not, there's a huge resilience and resourcefulness and creativity and so many of the things. It seems to me that so many of the things that people are looking for outside of them, that feeling and everything that's connected with it is actually the source of that. It has the answers to all of that. And I know that when I was told that 12 years ago or whatever, I was like, you clearly live on a different planet than me. I've got a whole bunch of stuff that needs attending to. I need these answers to these problems. I need these solutions to these issues. Da, da, da. It was just like, that seemed poles apart from where I was. And yet, the word I heard you use, and I agree with you, is the practical reality of that. And I know that you work with executives, with, you know, people who are very highly paid and have big results they're trying to get, and they wouldn't even listen to you if there wasn't something that they perceived as very practical, down to earth, something they can really use. How do you work with corporate America using this understanding?
Well, I'll talk about a executive I just worked with last week, and here was a relatively young executive in just his early 40s, but had moved to quite high in the company, a Fortune 500 company. And he was tasked with making an enormous change in the way that this company did their information technology. And he was a brilliant guy, an execution machine. And by that I mean, you ask him to do something, it would get done. But he left bodies in the wake. Or as a colleague of mine said, friction burns everywhere he went. Because he was so intent on getting the job done. Which, again, isn't that what I get paid for? Is what his response would be. Isn't that what the company wants? They want me to get this job done. It's huge. Well, yes, the company does want you to get the job done, but he was leaving teams demoralized, or some teams got demoralized. Some teams just got pissed off at him. And he couldn't understand it, because to him, he was executing the plan. And as I worked with him, what he realized, which is really neat, he said, you know, I did not know that I was working under a sense of burden and pressure that was informing everything I did. I felt pressure and burden and the responsibility. He said, I didn't even know I felt it because it was so normal to me. It was so much a part of how I operate. And as he learned about the principles and as he learned about this inside-out nature of human experience, he saw that he was generating within his own mind that responsibility and pressure and burden, that it was self-created. He thought it was job-created, and he was just doing his best to, it was just part of the job. when he realized it was thought created, he looked at me and he said, "You mean I don't have to feel burdened and pressured?" I said, "No. It's you're doing it to yourself." And it was as if somebody just showed him that there was a light switch in a room after working in the dark forever. "You mean there's a light switch in the room?" It was like that for him. So he just saw that the feeling of responsibility, the burden, the stress was optional. It was something he didn't need, and that he was creating for himself, and it was making him a leader that didn't inspire people because he was so serious and harsh and intense. So I just talked to him yesterday, and he said, "Sandy, I can't tell you what it's meant to me I see my thinking everywhere." So everywhere I look, I see my thinking. And he says, "And you know what? I see other people's thinking too. And I can help them." Now, here's a guy who he's had all the technical knowledge he needed. He had all the drive and willingness to work hard. He had the work ethic, but he wasn't productive. And now he just sees a way to use all those strengths without the liability of that pressure and burden.
And let me check, because you described him as an execution machine, and possibly in both senses of the ambiguity.
Yeah, right.
I know when you could have been describing me when I used to do corporate project management. Mm-hmm. I would burn through teams, and we would deliver, but then
nobody wants to work with Jamie.
Yeah, well, and I'd move on and do the next project and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. The question I always had about that is, if I hadn't had that sense of burden, pressure, responsibility, all of that, would I have delivered anything? Because that's the thing, we always delivered. So I'm going to ask that question on behalf of anyone who's listening. I've got my own ideas about how the richness of what comes from this understanding can influence that situation. But what's your experience of that?
Well, I would call the burden, the responsibility, the intensity, I would group all of that into personal thought. It's personal thought. It's me thinking up how things should be. And all of us have personal thought. There's no escaping it. Personal thought is like an emergency brake. It's like riding with your emergency brake on. It's clogging the system. It's slowing down the system, and it's taking up a certain bandwidth that you would otherwise have for innovative and creative thought. So instead of having a 100% open channel for innovative and creative thought, and by that I mean allowing for new and fresh ideas to show up, to tell you what to do next, to tell you how to handle this whatever issue or problem that has come up. Instead of having that 100% open bandwidth, 20% of it, 10% of it, 50% of it is you thinking, I got to get this done. I got to get this done. This is really important. We better do it now. What if we don't do it? I got to push these people. That noise is in your system, and it's keeping you from optimizing the creativity of the human mind. It doesn't look that way. It's a trick that we've kind of played on ourselves. We think we need that that noise. We don't. I remember many years ago I was on a boat with some friends out in the ocean, and I have this idea in my head that the ocean is really, really deep, and if you jump in it, you might drown. Mm-hmm. Even though I can swim, it's just one of those wacky thoughts that I have. And so it was really hot. We jump in the water, and I hold on to a rope that's attached to the boat. Well, we're in waves, and so I'm holding on to this rope, which is attached to the boat, and the boat's moving up and down, so I'm moving up and down with this rope. And it's actually pulling me under, and it's actually making me work harder. Mm-hmm. My friends who are with me say, Sandy, let go of that rope. That rope is really making your job harder. Mm-hmm. Oh no, I say. I'm not letting go of this rope. This rope is what's keeping me safe. And they came over to me and said, look, the rope is making it harder. Let it go. Well, eventually, I let it go. And of course, I float. Well, it's the same thing with this personal thought that we have, that we habitually have. Oh, I can't give that up. If I give that thinking up, what's gonna keep us on task? Mm. But you discover, not only was it not helping you, it was actually making it harder. And when you wake up to that, do you lose your personal thought? No. It still rears its ugly head. It still comes to mind, but you're onto it. You're onto it. And you say, no, that's not helping.
It's so interesting. I was coaching someone the other day, and they said, they were really stressed out, and they were like, I've got all these things to do, and I need help prioritizing, and da-da-da-da-da. And I said, well, because I'd spoken to this person maybe a month or so before. And I said, well, if I remember rightly, last time we spoke, you said that after you got in a more relaxed, peaceful place in connection with that sense of well-being that's within you, you didn't have any trouble managing your time at all. In fact, you could really see the things that were clear priorities and the other stuff that was just getting in the way. Mm. And I'm just curious about, why that would be different now. And she just sort of went, oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
And just relaxed. And in that,
I forgot.
Literally.
Yes.
And it was I forgot. It's so good to hear that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Of course. And literally in the next few minutes, as she just started sort of dropping all the tension and, literally physically relaxed as well.
Yeah.
And then she knew exactly what she needed to do, mm-hmm. which started with taking some time off, because mm-hmm. she had done, as I've done many times, even since learning this, got myself into a bit of a state. Yeah. And then it seems from a place of a whole bunch of personal thinking, like, no, you don't understand. There really is all this stuff that needs to happen before I can feel a sense mm-hmm. of connection and, mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Peace about this.
Yeah, it's funny that we believe, or mistakenly believe, that all we get in life is personal thinking. It's all we can ever rely on. Well, everybody has examples of times in their life when they've just either quit or just kind of took a deep breath or stepped back or got distracted or whatever, and some new fresh thought showed up in their head. Everybody has examples of that. Well, how does that happen? And if you see that as a design of the human mind, that it actually works that way.
And a lot of people, when they hear about this, I've heard them say things like, so I need to learn to meditate. It's like, no. No, it's because, as you said, it's the way the human mind is designed.
Not that there's anything wrong with meditation. It's a fine thing. It's just you don't have to do anything. You just have to see how it works. I have colleagues who call it the operating system of the human mind, and that's a nice way to say it. It is an operating system, and it is a system, and it has what every system has. It's got rules or facts that are impersonal. That if you can see as impersonal, it's just like if you're putting. I'm going to date myself here, so I don't know about your listeners, but back in my day, we had slide projectors, and you put a slide in the projector, and that image was on the screen. Now, the projector doesn't care what slide you put in it. It doesn't have an opinion about it. It's just whatever the slide is, that's the image that'll go up on the screen. And your mind, the operating system of the human mind is impersonal. It in a way it doesn't care. Whatever you think, that is going to be what's projected as reality. So when you can step back and see the impersonal system of it, then it really helps you to just. You get the relaxation that understanding brings you.
And as I hear you say that, Sandy, I get the sense that understanding the impersonal nature of it is actually a really important, the fact that it's impersonal.
Yeah.
Actually, it seems to me like there's an importance there that may not be evident at first glance.
Yeah.
What's your sense?
Again, and not impersonal as in cold or unfeeling, but impersonal in the sense that gravity is impersonal. The gravity doesn't play favorites. It's the same gravity that's working on you that's working on me. The human mind. The operating system of the human mind works exactly the same for you as for me, as for 6.5 billion of us. Somehow knowing that it takes the specialness, out of my problems or out of my way of seeing life. It's just that's just an example of the system of how the mind works.
It's funny, I the impersonal nature of it is always, whenever I've heard that, I've been like, yeah, that's obvious, and it's never really had any impact. I was thinking about this the other day, and I suddenly remembered, like my background, you talked about that drugs and alcohol were a medication of choice in the past. Big ones for me as well, and it was a real problem for me, alcoholism and so on. And I remember when I first discovered that the things that I'd been experiencing in terms of the way I was relating to the world and to other people and to the way I was thinking, that was the same for a bunch of other people too, that it wasn't just me. I remembered that sense of, there was a relief there.
Yeah.
And that was long before I learned about the principles or anything like that.
Yeah.
But just discovering that everything that had seemed so personal wasn't actually, even the personal thinking wasn't as personal as it looked.
Yeah. The more personal your thinking is, the more lonely you feel, the more alone you feel, the more, nobody understands what I'm going through you feel. So if there's a continuum of personal thought on one end of the continuum and impersonal thought, if you want to use that phrase, which is a thought that just occurs to us out of the creativity of the human mind. If you have that continuum, the farther you go toward the personal end of that continuum, the more alone you feel.
It seems to me there's almost like a paradox, which is on the one hand the desire to be special and different.
I know.
And on the other hand,
know.
the richness of connection that comes from knowing, that we're all part of the same thing.
Right.
So I said earlier, it seems to me that nice feeling that Rita talked about, and that the other thing that's straight. I've heard a lot of people, or a number of people, who I've asked about, what first sparked your interest in this understanding, and their story has started with, "Well, I was about to give up."
Yeah.
Is there something about that, the sort of the willingness to give up on, our old way of thinking, or our old game plans for a living?
That's a great point. I think there is something to it. I mean, I don't know that it's an absolute necessity to bring you up to an insight, but to have an insight, you have to be willing to give up what it is you already know, because by nature, an insight is something new. It's something you haven't thought of before. So if you're holding on to what you already know, you think you're right, or you think it is the way you think it is, there's very little room in there for anything new. So yeah, there is something about, another word for that is the humility to see, wow, what I'm doing right now, what's the way I'm operating, way I'm seeing it is not working. It's not helping. It's not what I want. And that willingness to let it go. Sydney Banks, in a lot of his writing and his audio and video materials, talks about courage. The courage to give it up, to give up your personal thought. And I guess it is there's a certain amount of courage that is required. You have to be willing to turn your back on what you have already, what you already think is right. To some degree, you have to turn your back on it. And whether it's really courage, I don't know. For me, it felt like the same kind of courage you need to get out of the way of a moving bus. So is that courage? I don't think so. It's just, it was so obvious.
I've thought of a kind of, there's almost another paradox, which is that a lot of people who are listening to this are coaches, consultants, therapists, people in that domain. And almost by definition, that role carries the label of expert, and I know, and I have the answers and that sort of thing. And humility is a word that kind of has a bad press in Western society, as being kind of ever so humble or something like that. But my understanding of humility has developed over the last couple of years as being willing to say, even though the way I think about things seems absolutely grounded in reality and fact and the way things really are, I'm open to the possibility that I'm just not right about this. That as real as it seems, maybe there's something I've missed. Maybe there's a gap in the model.
Yeah, I'm open to the possibility. I love that phrase. Just love that phrase. Open to the possibility. And that's all it takes. This is just to be open to the possibility. Because again, the way the human mind is designed, you're open to the possibility, then X amount of that bandwidth is open to a new thought showing up for you. But if it's all full of what you already know, then it's hard for anything new to get through.
So I know that I was saying earlier that for me that I really get that sense that feeling, the depth of rich, because what you're saying, as I hear it, isn't just feel good, and we in the world of NLP, which I was training for many years, and step A is always to get people into a better state, because recognize that if people are feeling good, they'll make better decisions and be more resourceful and all that sort of stuff. But the good feeling that I think Rita was pointing to, and that I think you're talking about, is something with a richness and a depth and a resourcefulness that's beyond the realm of put someone into a good state kind of thing. Would you say a little more about that?
Yeah, boy, describing that feeling, it isn't. It's more to say what it isn't than what it is. So it isn't excitement. It isn't rah-rah. It isn't hyper positive, and it wasn't hyper. It's a calm, it's a clarity, it's a resourcefulness, it's a resilience, it's a feeling of well-being that the word I love is grace. It's a feeling of grace. You just are okay with what is, because you know that no matter what happens, and again, I don't know circumstantially what's going to happen to me. I mean, people are going to die in my family. I might get sick. My partner might get, who knows? I have no control over that, but to know that I was gifted with a capacity to think about life however I want to, really. And somehow to have that in the back of my mind, I know that whatever happens circumstantially to me, I will be okay. I'll find my way. Will I be happy all the time? No. Will I always enjoy it? No. But I know, somehow I know, having realized these principles to the little bit I've realized them, it's just grounded me, and I'm not afraid of what life might bring, because I figure I'll just find my way.
And my sense is there's also the word possibility, creativity, because when you're working with teams of executives and that sort of thing, one part of it, I'm guessing, is the value they get from the reduction in stress, the increasing resourcefulness, that sort of thing. Yeah. But my sense also is there's an ability to find, you use the words innovation and creativity, and that there are the quality of decision making goes up.
And the other thing that changes dramatically is people listen to one another. When you're wedded to your own thinking and you don't know it, that's why you walk into a lot of business meetings and they're excruciating, because nobody's listening. People are just talking, and very little ever gets done. You have a business meeting where people are willing, or at least awake to the fact that they have their own personal thinking on their mind, and it's interfering with their ability to hear what the other person is saying, and they allow themselves to kind of take their personal thinking off their mind and take in what another person is saying. Oh my God, that's revolutionized business meetings. I've been in business meetings with people and someone will be speaking and another person will say, you've probably said that 25 times. I never heard it till just now. So something as simple as that can change the face of how a company does business. It's a competitive advantage like no other.
And it speaks to what you were saying about insight, because I know there are things, even recordings that I've listened to 25 times, and then on the 26th time, I actually hear something, which makes a huge difference to me. And I know that I've heard it 25 times before, like I've heard the words. But I kind of just went, oh yeah, I know what that means.
Right.
Rather than allowing it to really, go in.
Yeah. I was at a business meeting and somebody actually was talking, and another person said, could you say that again? Because I didn't get anything out of it. They took the responsibility, the listener took the responsibility for not getting anything out of it, and asked the speaker to say it again. So, I mean, that kind of thing, when you're in a business meeting or when you're trying to solve a difficult problem, you've got everybody's operating system working optimally. Well, there's nothing you can't accomplish.
So, I know lots of people who are listening to this want to grow their businesses and maybe have the ambition to work with corporate clients and that sort of thing. What are some of your ideas about how to find clients, allow clients to find you, grow your business in that way?
Yeah, wow. I think what business people appreciate more than anything is a short, succinct message that is enough in their world, enough in their language that they can relate to it, but enough out of their world that they get intrigued by it. So I think that's a critical thing to develop when you're marketing yourself. You have to get a message. What are you trying to do? And say it as succinctly as you can. And again, enough in their world and enough out of their world so it captures their attention.
So what are the sort of things you say? Because the inside out understanding the principles is the kind of the epitome of vaporware in a way. It's like it's virtually invisible and yet incredibly impactful. How do you say something to businesses that's enough in their world but enough out of their world to intrigue?
Well, businesses have responded to phrases like understanding the operating system of the human mind. That has been a phrase they relate to. What do you mean, operating system? Well, it turns out that there's an understanding of how the mind operates, just like there's an understanding of how a machine operates. That the more you understand it, the more you can optimize it. They understand that resonates with them. They respond to helping cultures go through change gracefully. So creating a business that is change-proof or that transitions with ease. That is something that every business is interested in because change is their life. The whole notion that an executive or a leader brings their state of mind to a project along with their expertise and their experience, that state of mind dimension has been invisible to business. They've been much more interested in experience and expertise, education. They have not been that interested in the state of mind dimension.
And yet it's the biggest leverage point there is.
Oh my God. Yeah. So just enlightening an executive about that dimension is intriguing to them.
And how do you come to be having those conversations where you're telling them about that in the first place?
Yeah, that's... I think that how you get clients is it's developing relationships. You just have to get out and meet as many people as possible and have as many conversations as you possibly can. It's been a while. There's now in my career, work tends to come to me. But back in the day when I had to go find it, I just put myself in as many venues as I could, asking for 5-10 minutes of a person's time. Mm-hmm. That's what I mean by getting your message very succinct.
Yeah, another friend of mine talks about if you offer enough invitations to have those conversations, invitations lead to conversations, which lead to proposals, which leads to client relationships.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. But again, the thing that this work, it's different, I think, than some other kinds of coaching and leadership work that are out there. You have to walk the talk. You can't teach what you don't know. And so you really, and that doesn't mean you're ever going to know it all. You're not going to know it all. But whatever insight you've had, if you can mine that, and because you'll know that, you can talk about that, chances are there's somebody out there who's dying for that same insight.
And the state of mind that you bring to those conversations is the kind of WD-40 of making that. Well, it's probably more than the WD-40. It's probably the meat and potatoes of it.
It is. And your ability to listen from that state of mind, because people tell you what they need if you listen carefully. Yeah.
Sandy, where can people find out more about you and what you do if they want to get in touch with you, or they?
Well, you can. They can call me at my home. I have an office in my home, and that number is 360-466-9154.
9154.
And I have an email, and it's skrot@ncia.com.
So that's skrot@NCIA, November Charlie India Alpha.com.
Correct.
Sandy, thank you so much for your time. I really encourage people to get in touch with you.
I'd love it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jamie.
Thanks for listening. This episode was brought to you by the Certified Clarity Coach Training Program, and the 2018 program is now open for registration. And here's something you need to know. We're not running the program next year, so the intake that's starting this September 2018 is the last chance you'll get to join us until 2020 at the earliest. So if you'd like to find out more about the program and see what's involved in bringing an understanding of these principles into every aspect of your life, go to jamiesmart.com/coach. That's jamiesmart.com/coach.